Ok, bonjour mes amis. Je suis désolée que nous ne pouvions pas nous rencontrer aujourd'hui sur Internet, mais quand même, c'est la vie. I am going to go ahead and give you the lesson that I was going to do during the live class today, and I'm going to do it just as a recording, so hopefully you can watch this at your leisure and then practice with it as much as you need to learn how to do these boot verbs. They're officially called stem-changing verbs, but we call them boot verbs, all of us grammar teachers out there, just because you'll see. So stem-changing verbs are all ER verbs, and you know how to conjugate ER verbs. So like I had mentioned in class today, it's a pretty simple step to go to the stem change. So these are regular ER verbs, and they will have a stem change when you conjugate them in the present tense. That's the only tense you know so far, so this is what you're worrying about in the present tense. In particular, the stem change just exists for pronunciation purposes, but the spelling change is important, and that's why I'm going over this. It's easy to think that accents are just extra marks that we throw in that really don't have any meaning, but accents are important, and especially with stem changing verbs, they make a difference. So let's be careful when we're putting accents in now that we're moving forward with some more sophisticated verb changes. Okay, so first, to determine if a verb is a stem-changing verb, you need to look at the infinitive and what part of the infinitive comes before the ER. That's what we would call the stem. Most infinitives with an E or an accented E in the syllable before the ER are stem-changing verbs. So I've given you a chart below here with 12 different verbs. Some of them are stem changing and some are not. The question is, can you tell which ones are and which ones are not? So you have to follow that rule that I just gave you. They have an E or an accented E in the syllable before the ending. So you can take off the ER. The ER is the last syllable of the verb. It's that syllable right before it is what you're looking at. So for instance, préférer definitely has an accented E right before the ending, the ER. Lever also is a stem-changing verb. It has an E. Bavarder is not. Écouter is not. Aimer is not. Espérer definitely is. You can see the accented E before the ER ending. Adorer, not a problem. No E there. But acheter is a stem-changing verb. Jouer is not a stem-changing verb. Partager, not stem-changing. And regarder, not a stem-changing. But promener is. You can look at all of those verbs that I've circled, and you can tell that the syllable before the ending has an E or an E with an accent. That's how you're going to know that these are stem-changing verbs. Okay, so we're going to start with the first type. That's just plain old E to an accented E. So if the last vowel in the stem of the verb is just a plain old E, that is a stem-changing verb. An example is the verb acheter. Acheter means to buy. And you can see the E right before the T and then the ER. That's the E we're talking about. So when we drop off the ER, we're left with the stem, achète, right? With a stem-changing verb, you're actually going to have two different stems. Either the achète without an accent or an achète with an accent grave. Notice that the accent starts at the top and goes down. That's that verb, that accent grave that we've talked about. So when I conjugate the verb, j'achète, tu achètes, il achète. You'll notice which parts of my verb have the accent and which parts of my verb do not. Nous achetons, vous achetez, there is no accent in the stem. So you can see how it's one verb, I've conjugated it in the present tense, I have my 6 different endings, but the stem is different for 4 of my 6 subject types. Now, if you take a close look at the formation of this little chart, you'll see I have a boot. That's why we call these a boot verb, because if you put them in the chart and you look at the ones that that have an accent or that change the spelling in the stem, they're inside of the boot. It's one of those funny things to explain. If I had a whiteboard, I'd show you by drawing it, but there's your boot in the green line. So inside the boot, the stem will change. Outside of the boot, they do not. Now here's a funny little note. with boot verbs, here's what you keep in mind. The nous and the vous form of the verb is always going to resemble the infinitive. So if the infinitive does not have an accent, neither does the nous or the vous form. If the infinitive does have an accent, nous and vous are going to have the exact same accent. Okay, moving on. Oh, sorry, I do have more examples of the same kind of verb. So verbs that are conjugated like acheter, that means they don't have an accent in the infinitive, but they will gain an accent in the conjugation. In the boot, lever, to raise, amener, which is to bring, enlever, to remove, geler, to freeze, peser, to weigh, and promener, to walk. If you look at all of these verbs, one thing that they all have in common is that the syllable before the ER, there is an E and it is not accented. And that means that when I conjugate it inside of the boot, that's the je, tu, il, elle, and il, elle pluriel forms, will all have an accent grave. Okay. Second kind of boot verb is E with an accent. So in some of our infinitives, we had an E that has an accent already. You will notice, again, these are very tiny little diacritical marks. If you look at the E's on this page, you see that the first E has an accent aigu, and the second E has an accent grave. Yikes, right? We have to know that our accents go in two different directions. So accent aigu starts low and goes high. Accent grave starts high and goes low. Bon. So if the last vowel in the stem of a verb is an E with an accent aigu, it is a stem changing verb. And that E accent aigu will change inside the boot to an E accent grave. So take, for example, the verb répéter. Répéter, you can see how I have two accents in répéter. It's going to be interesting when I conjugate it. Right now they're parallel to each other, right? They're both aigu accents. They both start low and go high. When I conjugate my verb, I'm going to have two stems. One stem has two parallel accents, and one stem, my accents are going to make almost like a tent. Bien. So here's my boots. Je répète, tu répètes, il répète. Nous répétons, vous répétez, il répète. It's a subtle sound change, but it is there. This is actually one where you hear the difference in the accents. And again, notice where my boot is. Je, tu, il, elle. Those are always the subject pronouns that are inside of the boot. That's where the spelling change will happen. So it's kind of critical when you're working with stem changing verbs to notice how the infinitive is spelled. And again, looking at those little tiny accent marks, we have to pay attention to the little details now. Which direction do they go in? When you're looking at the infinitive, répéter, remember they're parallel. So nous and vous are always going to resemble the infinitive. Nous and vous also have parallel aigu accents. Bien. Nous répétons, vous répétez. Are you getting the hang of this? Are you understanding how the boot works? Why I call it a boot? It really isn't a boot. It has nothing to do with boots in general. And in fact, a French person would have no idea what you were talking about if you said, oh, that's a boot verb. They don't know that. It's just for us because we're used to using this chart when we conjugate our verbs and we know which subject pronouns change and which subject pronouns do not change spelling. All right, so other accented infinitives that are similar to répéter, considérer, compléter. You see this one all the time. It's in our choice grids every week. Préférer, we've been using this for a number of months now. Préférer, and remember when we've been writing it out, I've told you to make that little tent with the accents. Now you know why. It's a boot verb. Je préfère, gonna have a tent. Refléter, to reflect. Révéler, to reveal. Célébrer, to celebrate. Espérer is to hope. Posséder is to possess. Protéger, to protect. And finally, suggérer is to suggest. Every single one of these verbs, again, looking at what is in common here, you have those accented E's in the syllable before the final syllable of the infinitive. And that's what tells us they're boot verbs. All right, last one, I promise. And this one has nothing to do with accents. It's a Y to I boot verb. A little bit different. So there's one type of stem changing verb that are verbs that end in Y-E-R. In this type of verb, the Y will become an I inside of the boot. in the forms of the verb that don't have an ending that is pronounced, we don't need to have a Y there, right? There's no Y sound going forward. So the Y just changes to an I. And let me show you an example. We've got the verb envoyer. That means to send. So my two stems are envoie with an I or envoie with a Y. Bien. And remember that nous and vous always is going to resemble the infinitive. So that makes it pretty easy to know what my stem will be. I'm going to keep the Y in the nous and the vous forms. Why do I do that? Because I hear the ending. Nous envoyons, vous envoyez. I hear the next syllable after the Y, so I want to have a Y there. J'envoie, I have a silent ending, so I don't need a Y. It just kind of makes sense. J'envoie, tu envoies, il envoie, and ils envoient. There are a few verbs, and we've been using a couple of them already, that are like these, like envoyer, and that they're Y-E-R verbs. Let's see what I've got here. Balayer is to sweep. Essuyer is to dry. Employer is to employ. And nettoyer is to clean. Good one to know. And payer, of course, very essential verb. Payer is also an accent verb. It's a boot verb because that Y becomes an I. Je paie is P-A-I-E. Bien. All right. I was going to challenge you to a space race if we had a live class, but instead I'm going to have you just do it on your own. I will put the, I'll just put the Socrative quiz up. This is the code you'll need to do it. It's Brookhuizen, all caps, 2474. You got to get the number right. I have to warn you because people have done this in the past for me, and when they type in my name and they don't type the right number, they get a whole Dutch setting. So be careful. You want to make sure that you use 2474. That's the correct room number. Hope to see you on the flip side. Maybe we'll be able to get this to work next week. Au revoir à tout le monde et bonne chance.